My name is Caroline. I am 38 years old and I teach high school English in Cottonwood Falls, Kansas. Last Tuesday, my mother called from her sprawling estate in Leawood. She informed me I was the family cautionary tale, called my $45,000 salary an embarrassment, and ordered me to drive up for their summer gala to wrangle my sister's teenagers. I did not argue. I let her talk. Then right before hanging up, she casually asked for my social security number to update a dormant family trust. I smiled into the phone. I gave her a fake 9-digit number I memorized years ago for exactly this kind of moment. Then I opened my laptop and called my attorney to set a trap. My mother did not want to update a trust. She was trying to steal my identity to access a line of credit she had no idea I spent the last 10 years securing. Before I tell you how this backfired on them in front of hundreds of people, please hit like and subscribe if you connect with this story. You are listening to Hazel Tells Stories. Drop your age and your city in the comments below. I always read them. Now let me take you back to that Tuesday evening on my porch when the people who called me a failure tried to use me as their final lifeline. The evening air in Cottonwood Falls felt thick. I sat on my front porch with a stack of sophomore essays and a red pen. The street was quiet. Out here you can hear a car coming from a mile away. My phone vibrated against the wooden table. The screen read, Beatrice. I let it ring 3 times before answering. Caroline, she said. No greeting, no asking how my day went. She spoke with the brisk efficiency of a manager delegating a task to an underperforming employee. We are hosting the summer gala this weekend. You need to be here by Friday afternoon. The caterers are demanding too much direction and Vanessa needs to network. I need someone to manage the teenagers so they do not ruin the aesthetic. Vanessa is my younger sister. She lives 3 miles from our parents in a 6-bedroom house she shares with her husband Bradley. They wear designer clothes and lease imported cars. I live in a 2-bedroom farmhouse with a metal roof. In my family, Vanessa is the standard. I am the disappointment. Mom, I have parent-teacher conferences on Friday, I said. I cannot just leave. Beatrice sighed. The sound was sharp enough to cut glass. Please do not make this difficult, Caroline. You are a public school teacher in a town no one cares about. It is not exactly high-stakes corporate law. Vanessa is trying to secure a seat on the hospital board. She actually has ambition. Do not be selfish. You already serve as the family cautionary tale. The least you can do is make yourself useful. I set my red pen down. My pulse remained steady. Decades of practice taught me how to drain the emotion from my voice when speaking to my mother. I will drive up Friday night, I said. Good. She paused. The shift in her tone was subtle. The forced casualness gave her away immediately. By the way, I am sitting down with the estate planner tomorrow morning. Your grandfather left a dormant family trust we are finally dissolving. I need your social security number to process the distribution. It is just a formality. My grandfather died 12 years ago. He left his modest estate to my father. There was no dormant trust. There was no distribution. People with money do not ask for sensitive tax information over a phone call at 7 in the evening. People who are desperate do. I gave her the fake numbers. She repeated them back, her voice tight with suppressed relief, and ended the call. I sat in the quiet of my porch and looked at my phone. My mother thought I was a naive country mouse she could outsmart. She had no idea she just triggered an alert I set up months ago. The Golden family was drowning and they were reaching for my neck to stay afloat. The morning after my mother tried to harvest my social security number, I woke up at 5. I drove to the high school and unlocked my classroom before the sun came up. It is a habit I formed in my first year of teaching. The quiet allows me to center myself before the chaos of adolescence fills the hallways. My classroom is practical. Cinder block walls painted a pale yellow, sturdy desks, whiteboards covered in grammar rules and reading schedules. It is a space designed for function and growth. It is the exact opposite of my sister Vanessa's life. Vanessa lives in a 6-bedroom stone estate in Leawood. The house features a dramatic double staircase, imported marble floors, and a wine cellar they stock strictly for appearances. Her husband Bradley works as an executive at a regional finance firm. For the last 14 years, My family has treated Bradley like royalty, and Vanessa like his brilliant queen. Their marriage was less a union and more a corporate merger designed to secure country club invitations and elevated social standing. Whenever our family gathered, Vanessa made sure to remind everyone of the hierarchy. She wore outfits that cost more than my monthly mortgage. She complained about the wait times at exclusive resorts. She spoke about my teaching career as if it were a quaint volunteer hobby I did because I lacked the drive to succeed in the real world. I let her play her part. I knew what happened to people who challenged her narrative. They were swiftly cut out and punished by our parents. At 7:15, my cell phone vibrated on my desk. The screen lit up with Vanessa's name. I looked at the clock. She never called before 9 unless she needed an audience or a favor. I answered the phone. "Good morning, Vanessa," I said. "Do not tell me it is a good morning," she snapped. "I have been dealing with incompetent people since I woke up." Her voice carried that familiar frantic edge. It was the tone she used when the illusion of her perfect life required maintenance. "What is going on?" I asked. "It is Leo," she said, referring to her 16-year-old son. "He brought home a practice test score that is frankly unacceptable. Bradley and I are looking at Ivy League admissions for him next year. You know the environment. It is fiercely competitive. Everyone is hiring private consultants. I interviewed a firm in Chicago yesterday, and the woman had the audacity to quote me $250 an hour for remote sessions. $250. It is robbery." I sat back in my chair. $250 an hour was actually on the lower end for elite college prep consulting, but Vanessa did not know that. She also did not know that I was intimately familiar with those exact rates. "I told Bradley it was absurd to pay a stranger when we have a teacher right in the family," Vanessa continued. She paused, likely waiting for me to jump in and offer my services. I let the silence stretch. I learned a long time ago that silence forces the other person to reveal their hand. Anyway, Vanessa huffed, realizing I was not going to volunteer. "I need you to tutor Leo, twice a week over video call. You need to focus on his essay structure and reading comprehension. We cannot afford any weak spots on his transcript." By cannot afford, I knew she meant they literally could not afford the Chicago consultant. The red flags from my mother's phone call the night before were multiplying. "I have a full teaching schedule, Vanessa," I said, keeping my voice level. "And grading takes up most of my evenings." She scoffed. "It is not like you are teaching advanced astrophysics, Caroline. You read paperbacks with farm kids. I am talking about Princeton. I know your little public school brain might find the Ivy League requirements intimidating, but you just need to follow the rubrics I send you. Plus, this saves us money that we can put toward the summer gala. Think of it as your contribution to the family." There it was, the insult wrapped in a command. She was demanding my time, insulting my intelligence, and expecting me to do it for free under the guise of family duty. I reached out and tapped the screen of my laptop. I opened a specific application I keep pinned to my taskbar. I clicked a red button. The audio recording began. Kansas allows one-party consent for recording conversations. As long as one person in the conversation knows it is being recorded, it is perfectly legal. I was that one person. "Let me make sure I understand," I said clearly into the phone. "You want me to provide elite college preparatory tutoring for Leo twice a week entirely for free?" "Obviously," Vanessa said, her annoyance peaking. "We are family. Family helps family. You have no husband and no children to take care of. You have plenty of free time. Do not make this a bigger deal than it is. I will text you his availability. Just make sure his essays are flawless." She hung up without saying goodbye. I stopped the recording. I saved the audio file to a secure cloud folder titled Receipts. It was the first piece of hard evidence in my new armory. I now had my mother fishing for my social security number and my sister demanding free labor while slipping up about needing to save money. The picture of their financial ruin was becoming clearer by the hour. I felt a brief flash of pity for Bradley. The man was likely drowning in debt to keep his wife wrapped in designer labels. But my pity evaporated when I thought about how he looked right through me at every Thanksgiving dinner, secure in his belief that his bank account made him a superior human being. The first bell rang. The hallway outside my door filled with the sound of slamming lockers and teenage voices. I closed my laptop and stood up to greet my first period class. 10 minutes later, while my students were doing silent reading, my phone vibrated in my pocket. I pulled it out discreetly. It was a text message from Leo. I had not spoken to my nephew privately in almost a year. Vanessa tightly controlled her children's communication, preferring to use them as props in her social media posts rather than treat them as independent people. I opened the message. The text did not say anything about practice tests or Princeton or essay rubrics. It read, "Aunt Caroline, Mom said you are going to call me tonight for tutoring. Please do not tell her I said this, but I do not need help with the essays. I just need an excuse to stay in my room. It is really bad here right now. They will not stop yelling at each other. I do not know what to do anymore." I stared at the screen. The small calculating part of my brain that had been planning how to expose my parents and my sister went completely quiet. This was no longer just about defending myself against financial fraud or proving my family wrong. The stakes had fundamentally changed in the span of 30 seconds. Vanessa and Bradley were not just ruining their own lives with their financial deception. They were crushing a 16-year-old boy under the weight of their crumbling facade. Leo was trapped in a house built on lies, listening to his parents tear each other apart over money they did not have. He was reaching out to the only adult he thought might actually listen. He was reaching out to the cautionary tale. I typed my response quickly and hit send. "I have got you, Leo. We will talk tonight. Just breathe." I slipped the phone back into my pocket. My sister thought she was exploiting my free time to save a few $100s. She had no idea she had just handed me a direct line to her children. The war was no longer about my pride. It was a rescue mission, and I was going to dismantle their entire illusion to get those kids out safely. I finished my teaching day. The afternoon sun baked the Kansas pavement as I drove my 5-year-old sedan back to my farmhouse. I like my house. It sits on 2 acres of land far from the manicured subdivisions of Leawood. The metal roof pings when it rains. I grow tomatoes in the back. It is quiet. I walked inside, poured a glass of water, and booted up my home computer. It was time to check on the reality my family knew nothing about. I opened a secure browser and logged into my business portal. The dashboard loaded, displaying the current balance for Vantage Consulting LLC. It showed a high 6-figure sum. I am a public school English teacher. I make $45,000 a year from the state of Kansas. But 8 years ago, I realized that the same skills I used to help farm kids craft compelling state university essays were highly marketable elsewhere. I started taking on remote clients. Word spread. Parents on the coasts will pay exorbitant amounts of money for someone who can turn a mediocre student into a compelling candidate. I built Vantage Consulting under a corporate veil. My clients know me only by my first initial and my stellar success rate. I charge $300 an hour. I have a wait list that stretches 18 months. I make more in a single quarter than Bradley makes in a year at his regional finance firm. My family believes I am barely scraping by. They think I clip coupons and buy generic brand cereal because I have no ambition. I never corrected them. Silence is a powerful shield. If they knew about the money, they would demand it. They would claim a stake in my success. They would insist I owed them for the privilege of carrying their last name. I opened a different tab. This one led to a financial management site. I navigated to the 529 college savings accounts I set up 5 years ago. There were 2 accounts, one for Leo, one for Vanessa's 14-year-old daughter. I reviewed the balances. Both accounts were fully funded, enough to cover 4 years of tuition, room, and board at any out-of-state public university or put a significant dent in a private college bill. I started those accounts the year Bradley bought a $90,000 boat he named the Dividend. I saw the way he and Vanessa prioritized their image over their children's stability. I knew the boat would eventually sink, metaphorically speaking, and I wanted to make sure Leo and Maya had a lifeboat. My phone chimed, a sharp, distinct tone I assigned to security alerts. I picked it up. An email notification filled the screen. It was from a major credit monitoring service. Alert: a hard inquiry has been placed on your credit file. I clicked the notification. The details loaded. Someone had attempted to open a new line of credit, a substantial personal loan using my social security number. The inquiry originated from an IP address in Leawood, Kansas. They used a previous address of mine, an apartment I rented right out of college, to try and bypass the security checks. The family trust story was indeed a complete fabrication. My mother did not want to distribute grandfather's money. My parents were actively trying to steal my identity to access cash. I did not panic. I did not feel the sting of betrayal. You cannot be betrayed by people you stopped trusting a decade ago. I felt a cold, calculated clarity. They were crossing a line from emotional manipulation into federal fraud. I picked up my phone and dialed a number saved under the name David. David is my attorney. He handles the corporate structure for Vantage. He is sharp, pragmatic, and possesses a terrifying understanding of financial law. He answered on the second ring. "Caroline," he said, "tell me you have decided to finally incorporate in Delaware." "Not today, David," I replied. "We have a different situation. Someone in Leawood just attempted to run a hard credit check using my social security number and an old address. I suspect it is my parents." There was a brief pause on the line. Then David's voice dropped an octave, shifting from friendly advisor to legal predator. "Do you want me to lock down your credit files?" "Yes," I said. "But I want to do more than that. They asked for my social security number last night, under the guise of a dormant family trust. I gave them a fake number. They clearly found the real one, likely from some old tax document my mother kept. If they are trying to open a loan in my name, they are desperate." "How desperate?" David asked. "Desperate enough to commit a felony," I said. "I want you to set up a legal tripwire." "Explain," he said. "I do not want to just block the inquiry I instructed. I want to know exactly what they are applying for and with which institution. I want you to draft a formal notice of identity theft. Have it ready to file with the federal authorities the moment they actually try to sign a document forging my signature. Let them get right to the edge of the cliff. Do not stop them from walking toward it. Just make sure the net is waiting when they jump." David chuckled. It was a dry, humorless sound. "You are a very dangerous woman, Caroline. I am a high school English teacher, David," I corrected him mildly. "I just know how to recognize a poorly written plot. I will monitor the credit bureaus and trace the inquiry," he said. "If they attempt to finalize any loan documents using your credentials, I will receive the alert before the funds clear. We will have them dead to rights. I will have the paperwork drafted by tomorrow morning." "Thank you, David," I said. I hung up the phone. I looked out the window at my quiet 2 acres. The Kansas sun was setting, casting long shadows across the grass. My parents thought they were clever. They thought they were dealing with the submissive, embarrassed daughter they trained me to be. They believed they could use my clean credit history to plug the holes in their sinking ship without me ever noticing. They were about to discover that the cautionary tale they mocked for 14 years was the only one holding the pen. The war had silently begun, and they had no idea they were already losing. I packed a small overnight bag. I threw in a pair of practical slacks and a few plain blouses. Beatrice would hate them. That was the point. I needed to play the part of the country mouse perfectly when I arrived in Leawood. I needed them to underestimate me until the very last moment. Tomorrow I would drive into the heart of their illusion. I would sit at their dining table. I would let them insult me. I would gather every piece of evidence I needed to dismantle their entire facade. And I would make sure Leo and Maya were standing safely behind me when the walls came down. I merged onto the highway and drove the 2 hours from Cottonwood Falls to Leawood. The transition between the two worlds is always jarring. You leave behind the open fields and the quiet horizons of rural Kansas, and you enter a highly curated matrix of suburban wealth. Leawood is a place where the lawns are chemically engineered to remain perfectly green even in the dead of winter. I turned onto Vanessa Street. It is a sprawling cul-de-sac, lined with towering stone facades, wrought iron gates, and manicured hedges that look like they were trimmed with a laser. I pulled my reliable 5-year-old Honda sedan into the wide driveway. I parked it deliberately next to Bradley's gleaming Porsche Macan. The visual contrast was loud and intentional on my part. My car represented function, stability, and a life lived within my means. His car represented a monthly lease payment he used as a weapon to project dominance. I grabbed my plain canvas overnight bag from the passenger seat and walked up the stamped concrete path. Before I could even reach out to ring the doorbell, the heavy mahogany front door swung open. My mother Beatrice stood in the threshold. She wore a tailored linen pantsuit and held a crystal glass of sparkling water with a lime wedge. She did not smile. She looked me up and down. Her eyes snagged on my sensible navy slacks and my flat, comfortable loafers. At that exact moment, a woman walking a perfectly groomed golden retriever passed by on the public sidewalk. Beatrice immediately raised her voice, ensuring the neighbor heard every single syllable. "Good afternoon, Susan," my mother called out, waving brightly with her free hand. "My oldest daughter Caroline is here. She drove all the way from the country to help us out with the gala preparations. She is our little country mouse, always wearing those practical clothes." Susan offered a tight, polite smile, gave a small wave, and kept walking down the street. Beatrice turned her gaze back to me the second the neighbor looked away. The bright smile vanished instantly. She looked at me as if I were a muddy footprint on her pristine foyer rug. I did not flinch. I did not shrink away. I let the insult wash over me because I knew the script we were reading from. I was playing the role she assigned me, so she would remain blissfully blind to the trap my attorney David and I had set. "Hello, Mom," I said smoothly. "Thank you for having me." I stepped inside the house. The air was freezing. Vanessa kept the air conditioning blasting to combat the humid Kansas summer heat, a luxury that cost hundreds of dollars a month just to maintain the chill. The entryway featured a towering chandelier and imported marble tiles that echoed sharply under my shoes. It was opulent, but it felt distinctly hollow. There were no family photos on the console tables. There were no signs of children actually living and playing in the space. There were only stylized art pieces purchased by an interior decorator to fill the void. From the back of the house, I heard Vanessa shouting. I walked toward the noise, leaving my mother to close the heavy door behind me. My sister stood at the expansive granite island in her designer kitchen, jabbing her finger at a clipboard. Beatrice walked past me and joined her. They were arguing with a vendor over speakerphone. Vanessa was demanding a specific type of imported white orchid for the gala centerpieces, and stubbornly refusing to pay the expedited shipping fee required to get them to Kansas in time. The vendor on the other end of the line sounded exhausted, trying to explain basic supply chain logistics to a woman who refused to hear the word no. I stood near the arched doorway and watched them. They were obsessing over floral arrangements for a party they were hosting, simply to impress people who did not actually care about them. The misplaced priorities were staggering. I spent the last 15 years teaching high school English. You learn a lot about human behavior when you spend every single day managing 30 restless teenagers. You learn how to spot a liar from the back of the room. You learn how to notice the tiny details people are desperately trying to hide. While my mother and sister screamed at a local florist over speakerphone, my eyes tracked the kitchen. The counters were pristine, almost staged for a magazine shoot, but the junk drawer near the stainless steel refrigerator was not quite shut. A thick stack of envelopes had been shoved inside haphazardly, catching the edge of the wood and preventing the drawer from closing flush. It disrupted the curated aesthetic of the entire room. I walked over to the refrigerator. I grabbed a glass from the open shelving and poured myself water from the dispenser. I leaned against the counter, positioning my body right next to the jammed drawer. With my back turned slightly toward my mother and sister, I nudged the drawer open just an inch more with my hip. I looked down. The mail was mostly unopened, a bad sign in any household, but the envelope on the very top had a clear cellophane window. The paper inside was printed with bold red lettering. My eyes adjusted to the shadow of the drawer. I read the words perfectly. Notice of default. Final warning. This was not a misplaced utility bill. This was a mortgage foreclosure notice. The Golden family was not just struggling to keep up appearances. They were fundamentally broke. They were weeks away from losing the stone mansion, the marble floors, and the illusion they spent a decade building. I gently nudged the drawer closed with my hip until it clicked shut. I took a slow sip of my water. The chaotic puzzle pieces clicked into place. The attempted identity theft using my social security number. The demand for free college tutoring for Leo. The sheer desperation to put on this lavish summer gala. They were trying to secure Vanessa a seat on the local hospital board so Bradley could access a new circle of wealthy medical investors to bail out his failing finance firm. And I was their backup plan to fund the gap. The heavy fire door connecting the garage to the kitchen suddenly swung open. Bradley walked into the room. He stopped dead in his tracks when he saw me. The contrast between the man I saw at last year's Thanksgiving dinner and the man standing before me was startling. Bradley used to carry himself with the slick, untouchable arrogance of a successful finance trader. Today, his expensive suit jacket was deeply wrinkled. His silk tie was loosened and pulled askew. The skin under his eyes was dark and bruised with exhaustion. He looked like a man who had not slept a full, peaceful night in 6 months. He looked cornered by his own life. He saw me standing by the refrigerator. He did not offer a polite greeting. He did not ask about my drive from Cottonwood Falls. His eyes scanned my face and then looked me up and down. He was not looking at his sister-in-law. He was looking at a pristine credit score. He was looking at an untapped asset. He looked at me like a piece of meat to be butchered for cash. His gaze was hungry, cold, and devoid of familial affection. I felt a chill run down my spine, but I kept my posture relaxed and my face blank. Bradley forced a tight, artificial smile that did not reach his exhausted eyes. "Caroline," he said, his voice strained. "Good. You made it. We have a lot of important things to discuss at dinner tonight." I placed my water glass on the granite counter. The clink of the glass cut through the lingering tension in the room. "I will be ready," I said. I picked up my canvas bag and headed toward the guest room down the hall. I knew exactly what was coming next. They were going to try to corner me. They were going to try to shame me into handing over my future to save theirs. But they had no idea they were walking into a dining room where the menu had already been fundamentally rewritten by the country mouse. The dining room was a monument to manufactured importance. A 12-seat mahogany table took up most of the space under a glowing crystal chandelier. Beatrice had set it with the heavy silver and the fragile bone china, signaling to everyone that tonight was a highly orchestrated event. I took my assigned seat near the far end. William sat at the head. My father built a mid-sized regional logistics firm in the late 90s. He ran his company and his family using the exact same aggressive strategy. He relied heavily on intimidation and the fundamental assumption that everyone else in the room was weaker than he was. He possessed a booming baritone voice and a habit of taking up too much physical space at any table, leaning forward to force compliance from whoever sat across from him. We were served roasted chicken and asparagus. The sharp sounds of silver cutlery scraping against porcelain filled the heavy silence. Bradley sat directly across from me. His eyes darted toward the hallway every single time his phone buzzed in his suit pocket. He was sweating through the collar of his expensive dress shirt. Vanessa pushed a solitary piece of asparagus around her plate. She looked visibly nauseous. Beatrice observed the table like a theater director waiting for her actors to hit their marks. I cut my chicken and chewed slowly. I knew the rules of a hostile negotiation. The person who speaks first loses the psychological advantage. I let them sit and marinate in their own anxiety. Halfway through the main course, William cleared his throat. It was a loud, deliberate sound designed to demand undivided attention. The table froze. Bradley dropped his fork. Vanessa sat up straighter, her shoulders rigid. William folded his hands over his half-empty plate and locked his dark eyes on me. "Caroline," William began. His tone was practiced. It was the voice of a benevolent patriarch delivering necessary, unavoidable news. "We have a family matter to resolve tonight. As you know, the economic climate has been challenging recently. My logistics firm and Bradley's investment portfolio have taken a temporary strategic hit. It is nothing we cannot weather, but it requires liquid capital to maneuver past this specific quarter." I did not nod. I did not offer a sympathetic smile. I just watched his face. He continued, his voice tightening slightly when I refused to offer the expected validation. "Your grandfather left a modest inheritance in a designated trust," William said. We never touched it because it was tied up in an outdated probate structure. My attorneys recently found a legal pathway to release those funds. I am reallocating that capital to protect the family assets. I have the release papers sitting on the desk in my study. I need your signature tonight to transfer your portion into the primary holding account. This ensures Vanessa's children do not suffer because of market fluctuations. He framed the theft of my inheritance as a noble act of protection. He painted himself as a savior rather than a man begging his discarded daughter for a bailout. Before I could even process the audacity of the demand, Vanessa jumped into the silence. She leaned across the mahogany table, her manicured fingers gripping the edge of the wood so tightly her knuckles turned white. "You have to do this, Caroline," Vanessa said. Her voice dripped with condescension, masked as desperation. "You do not understand what is at stake here. Leo and Maya have tuition, elite extracurricular activities, and societal expectations. They have a real future to build. You live in a drafty farmhouse. You have no real life. You have no husband. You have no ambition beyond grading spelling tests in a town nobody can find on a map. You do not need that money. It is your duty to step up and sacrifice for the people in this family who actually have something to lose." She summarized my entire existence as a void. In her mind, my lack of a designer wardrobe and a wealthy spouse rendered me a non-entity. My resources were simply spare parts waiting to be harvested for her benefit. Years ago, that speech would have reduced me to tears. I would have internalized the shame. I would have signed the papers just to earn a fleeting crumb of their approval. Today, I felt nothing but a clinical curiosity. I looked at my sister, then at my father. They had stripped away all pretense. They were demanding my financial surrender and telling me I deserved to be robbed because I chose to teach children instead of chasing country club memberships. I placed my fork quietly on my plate. I rested my hands on my lap. I looked directly into my father's eyes, bypassing Vanessa entirely. "I understand you are facing a temporary strategic hit," I said, keeping my voice perfectly level and adopting the tone I use to manage misbehaving sophomores. "However, if you are asking me to invest my inheritance into the family portfolio, I treat all investments the same way. I will need to see the financial disclosures." The dining room went dead still. Even Beatrice stopped breathing. The concept of the family scapegoat demanding accountability was entirely foreign to them. I did not break eye contact with William. "I need the last 3 years of certified tax returns for both the logistics firm and Bradley's company." I continued, speaking clearly and deliberately. "I need a full accounting of all current debts, outstanding loans, and a detailed prospectus showing how my funds will be utilized and repaid. Once my personal attorney reviews those documents, I will make a decision regarding my signature." William's face turned a dangerous shade of crimson. The thick vein in his forehead pulsed against his skin. He was not used to being questioned. He operated in an ecosystem where his word was law, and his commands were met with immediate obedience. He slammed his heavy fist down on the mahogany table. The crystal water glasses rattled against the bone china. The sound cracked through the dining room like a gunshot. "You ungrateful brat!" William roared. He stood up from his chair, towering over the table, his chest heaving. "You do not demand paperwork from me. I put a roof over your head. I paid for your clothes. I gave you everything you have. You are going to walk into my study and sign those release forms right now." I did not flinch. I did not lean away from his anger. "No," I said. It was a single solitary syllable, but it carried the weight of a falling anvil. William pointed a trembling finger at my face. "If you defy me, I will cut you off entirely. You will no longer be a part of this family. I will call your pathetic little school district. I know the superintendent in your county. I will tell them you are unstable. I will tell them you are a liability. I will ruin your reputation in that tiny town. You will have nothing and you will be nothing." He expected me to crumble. He expected me to cry, apologize, and beg for his forgiveness. He used fear as his primary weapon, assuming I was still the frightened girl who craved his validation. He did not know that his validation was the last thing I wanted. I reached out and picked up my crystal glass. The ice clinked softly against the rim. I took a slow, deliberate sip of water. The cold liquid slid down my throat. I swallowed. I set the glass back down on the table, aligning it perfectly with the edge of my placemat. I looked at the red-faced, screaming man at the head of the table. I looked at my sister, whose jaw hung open in shock. I looked at my mother, who stared at me as if I had suddenly spoken a foreign language. My complete lack of emotional reaction infuriated them more than any screaming match ever could. By refusing to participate in their theatrics, I stripped them of their power. They had no leverage over a person who did not fear their rejection. "Excuse me," I said quietly. I stood up from my chair, pushed it back into place, and turned my back on the patriarch of the family. "I think I will retire to my room for the evening. Dinner was lovely, Beatrice." I walked out of the dining room, leaving them choking on their own rage. I walked down the long carpeted hallway toward the guest quarters. I knew the explosion I just caused would keep the adults occupied for hours. They would be pouring drinks and pacing the floors, trying to figure out how to break me, which meant the rest of the house was finally distracted. I closed my bedroom door and looked at the digital clock on the nightstand. The night was far from over, and I had a very important meeting with the true victims of this illusion. The digital clock on the nightstand flipped to 2 in the morning. I was not asleep. I sat in the dark guest room listening to the heavy silence of the stone house. Downstairs, the shouting had finally stopped around midnight. William had slammed the front door, presumably driving back to his own house, while Bradley and Vanessa had retreated to the master suite. The air conditioning hummed, pushing freezing air through the vents. I kept my clothes on, anticipating the fallout. I knew my refusal at the dining table would trigger a ripple effect. I just did not expect the ripple to reach my door so soon. A soft noise broke the quiet. It was a faint, hesitant scratching against the wood of my bedroom door. Then came a knock, so quiet I almost missed it. I stood up, walked across the plush carpet, and turned the handle. Leo and Maya stood in the dim hallway. The ambient light from the foyer below cast long shadows across their faces. They did not look like the polished camera-ready children Vanessa paraded on her social media feeds to garner likes from other wealthy mothers. They looked like refugees trapped in their own home. Leo, 16 years old, and usually hiding behind a thick veneer of teenage apathy, had red-rimmed eyes and tense shoulders. Maya, 14, stood slightly behind her brother, gripping the fabric of her oversized sweater like a lifeline. She was trembling from head to toe. I stepped back and opened the door wider. "Come in," I whispered. They slipped into the room. I closed the door and turned the lock, sealing us off from the rest of the mansion. I turned on the small bedside lamp, casting a warm, low light across the space. Maya sat on the edge of the mattress, pulling her knees to her chest. Leo paced the floor, his hands shoved deep into his sweatpants pockets. I sat next to Maya. I did not push them to speak. I let the safety of the locked room settle over them. I waited. Maya broke first. A choked sob escaped her throat. She covered her face with her hands, and years of carefully constructed perfection shattered into pieces. "It is bad, Aunt Caroline," she whispered, her voice hitching. "It is so bad here." I wrapped an arm around her narrow shoulders. "Tell me," I said. She leaned into me, seeking the maternal comfort her own mother withheld. "Mom hates me," Maya cried. She does not say it out loud, but I know she does. She forces me to train 20 hours a week at the gymnastics center. My wrists ache all the time. The doctors told her I need to rest, but she ignores them. She tells me I have to land a full-ride athletic scholarship to a Division I school, or I am useless to her. She treats my body like a lottery ticket she expects to cash in. I felt a cold surge of anger toward my sister, but I kept my voice soothing. "You are not a lottery ticket, Maya. You are a child." "It is not just the gymnastics," Maya continued, her words rushing out in a frantic, desperate stream. "The house phone rings all day long. Mom makes us unplug it from the wall. If a strange number calls my cell phone, I am supposed to ignore it. Leo looked at the caller ID last week when one slipped through. It was a collection agency. They were asking for Bradley. They are always asking for Bradley. Mom screams at me if I even look at the mail sitting on the kitchen counter. We are living like criminals in our own house." Leo stopped pacing. He stood at the foot of the bed, his jaw tight. "It is a war zone," he said, his voice dropping to a harsh, ragged whisper. "You only see the fake version they put on for company. The second the doors close and the guests leave, they tear each other apart." Bradley drinks scotch until he passes out in his home office. Vanessa throws things. We hear glass breaking at 3 in the morning. They scream about debt. They scream about keeping up appearances. They are obsessed with this stupid summer gala because they think it will somehow fix everything and make them look rich again. Leo rubbed his face with his hands, looking exhausted, far beyond his years. "But it will not fix anything," he said. "The money is gone. It has been gone for a very long time." I looked at my nephew. "How do you know for sure, Leo?" I asked. He let out a hollow, defeated breath. "Because of school," he said. "You know, I go to the prep academy across town, the one that costs $30,000 a year. The headmaster pulled me out of my calculus class on Tuesday. He made me sit in his office while the other students stared at me. He told me my tuition is 90 days past due. He said if my parents do not clear the balance by Friday, I am officially expelled. I have to clean out my locker. I have to leave all my friends and walk out the front doors in the middle of the day." Leo looked down at his shoes. His voice cracked, revealing the frightened boy underneath the teenage exterior. "Mom told me to just keep smiling and pretend everything is fine. She told me not to worry about the headmaster. She said she is handling it. But she is not handling it. She is planning a party to impress her friends while I am about to get kicked out of school for non-payment." Maya looked up at me, her eyes wide and terrified. "Aunt Caroline, please," she begged, grabbing my hand. "Can we come live with you? We can sleep on the floor. We will do chores every single day. We will not cost you anything. We just cannot stay here anymore. Please take us to Kansas with you." My heart broke for them, but my resolve hardened into impenetrable steel. They were children pleading for sanctuary from a life designed to look like a dream and function like a prison. Vanessa and Bradley were stripping their own kids of their dignity just to maintain a country club membership. I pulled Maya closer and reached out to grasp Leo's arm. "You do not have to sleep on the floor," I said firmly. "And you never have to beg for a safe place to live." I stood up and walked to my canvas overnight bag. I pulled out my laptop and set it on the small desk near the guest room window. I opened the screen and typed in my master password. I navigated to the financial portal I had reviewed just 24 hours ago in Cottonwood Falls. I gestured for Leo and Maya to come closer. "Look at the screen," I instructed. Leo leaned over my shoulder. His eyes scanned the numbers. He read the headings. 529 College Savings Plan. Beneficiary Leo. Beneficiary Maya. He looked at the total balances, his eyes widening in disbelief. He leaned closer to the monitor and counted the digits twice to make sure he was seeing it correctly. "Aunt Caroline," Leo whispered. "What is this?" I turned to face them. "For the past 5 years, I have fully funded those accounts," I explained. "I saw the way your parents spent money. I saw the cars and the lavish vacations and the endless social events. I knew it was not sustainable. I knew the bill would eventually come due, and I refused to let you two be the ones who paid the price for their arrogance. That money is yours. It is legally protected. It covers your entire college education no matter where you choose to go. Your parents do not know it exists, and they cannot access a single penny of it." Maya stared at the screen, tears spilling down her cheeks. "You did this for us?" she asked. "Why?" "Because you are my family," I said simply, "and family protects each other." Leo stepped back, running a trembling hand through his hair. He looked at me, seeing past the sensible clothes and the quiet demeanor his mother always mocked. He saw the safety net I built in the shadows while his own parents built a house of cards. "What do we do now?" he asked. "You go back to your rooms and you try to sleep," I said. "You wake up tomorrow and you play your parts perfectly. Do not let your mother know you spoke to me. Do not let her see that you are no longer afraid. Let her believe she is still in control. I am going to handle your parents." I closed the laptop with a definitive click. "They will never touch your future, I promise them. I give you my word." The children nodded, their faces marked by a profound, life-altering relief. The crippling anxiety they carried into the room had vanished, replaced by trust. They slipped out of my room as quietly as they entered. I locked the door behind them. I walked over to the window and looked out at the dark suburban street. I could not just walk away with the kids and take them to Cottonwood Falls. I needed to legally sever the parents' control to ensure they could never be used as pawns again. To do that, I needed hard, undeniable proof of the financial ruin and the fraud they were committing behind closed doors. The sun would be up in a few hours. I had a sprawling mansion to search, and I knew exactly what a sinking ship looked like from the inside. Thursday morning arrived with a suffocating heavy humidity that Kansas summers are famous for. Inside the Leawood estate, the air conditioning roared to maintain a perfect artificial chill. The house buzzed with a frantic forced energy. Beatrice and Vanessa were aggressively directing Bradley and William toward the garage. They had a standing brunch reservation at the local country club. The brunch was a mandatory appearance to maintain their social standing before the upcoming summer gala. They needed to be seen shaking hands, sipping mimosas, and projecting the illusion of unchecked prosperity. Vanessa looked at me standing in the pristine kitchen. She took in my plain navy slacks and my sensible cotton blouse. She sneered, her nose wrinkling in open disgust. "You cannot come to the club wearing that Caroline," she announced to the room. "It violates the dress code. You will embarrass Bradley in front of his partners." I offered a mild, agreeable smile and rubbed my temples with my fingertips. "I have a terrible headache anyway," I said, keeping my voice low and soft. "I will just stay here and rest. Please enjoy yourselves." The relief on my sister's face was obvious. She did not want her embarrassing rural sibling ruining her networking opportunities or occupying space at her table. William grunted his approval of my absence. They filed out the door. The garage mechanism rumbled, the Porsche engine roared to life, and they backed out of the driveway. The heavy fire door clicked shut, locking into place. The sprawling stone house fell entirely silent. I did not go to my guest room to rest. I dropped my hand from my temples. The mild, compliant smile vanished from my face. I walked straight down the long carpeted hallway toward Bradley's home office. Bradley modeled his office after a midtown executive suite. It featured a massive mahogany desk, 2 leather wingback chairs, and tall built-in shelves lined with expensive hardcover books he never actually read. It was a temple built to worship his own ego and project authority. But I know that men who obsess over their image always hide their failures in the dark. I bypassed the clean desktop and went straight for the bottom drawer of the heavy wooden filing cabinet in the corner. I pulled the handle. It was locked. I did not panic. I walked behind the mahogany desk and checked the top center drawer. A small silver key was sitting right next to a pile of expensive fountain pens. Arrogance makes people incredibly careless. They believe their homes are castles, and their secrets are untouchable. I took the key and unlocked the bottom cabinet. The pristine, curated organization of the rest of the office vanished inside this drawer. It was a chaotic dumping ground for bad news. I pulled out my cell phone and opened the camera application. I started sorting through the chaos with quick, efficient movements. I found the final demand notice from their primary luxury credit card company. The outstanding balance was $68,000. I took a clear, focused photograph. I found the warning letter from the private prep school threatening Leo with immediate expulsion for non-payment. I photographed it. Then I dug deeper and found the Holy Grail hidden beneath a stack of glossy golf magazines. It was an official legal document from the bank holding their primary mortgage. The bold red lettering across the top read, "Notice of default." They were 4 months behind on their massive housing payments. The bank was formally initiating foreclosure proceedings against the estate. They were mere weeks away from being evicted from their own illusion. I photographed every single page, making sure the dates, the account numbers, and the bank seals were perfectly legible. My digital armory was growing by the minute. My phone vibrated in my hand, signaling an incoming call. The screen displayed my attorney David's name. I answered immediately. "We have a hit," Caroline David said. His voice was clinical, precise, and devoid of emotion. "Your father did not stop at a simple credit inquiry. He submitted a formal application for a personal loan in the amount of $150,000. He used a digital signature program to forge your name on the primary guarantor line. He listed your occupation as a teacher and used your rural address to match the public records, but he routed the final deposit instructions to a shell account linked to his logistics firm. I leaned against Bradley's mahogany desk. My father was not just an arrogant bully, he was an active criminal. He believed he could steal my financial identity to bail out his failing company, assuming I would be too intimidated or too ignorant to ever fight back. "Did you freeze the application, David?" I asked. "No," David replied. "I paused the final clearance at the institutional level. The bank is currently processing the underwriting based on his forged documents. I can shut it down and flag it as fraud right now if you give the word." I looked down at the foreclosure notice resting on the leather blotter. I thought about Leo and Maya begging for a safe place to sleep. "No," I said firmly. "Do not shut it down yet. Let the bank approve the application. Let my father receive the official confirmation that his forged signature was accepted by the underwriters. Let him cross the line from attempted fraud to undeniable federal wire fraud. I want the crime fully documented by the financial institution. Just insert a hard freeze on the actual transfer of funds. He can put his neck in the noose, but he does not get a single penny." David let out a sharp, appreciative breath. "Understood," he said. "I will set the trap door. It will look approved on his end, but the money will bounce against our security hold. We will have the federal paper trail secured by tomorrow." I hung up the phone. I locked Bradley's filing cabinet and returned the silver key to the top drawer. I left the office exactly as I found it. The financial ruin of the Golden family was now fully documented in my possession. But I knew Vanessa's psychology. She would not back down from her demands unless she felt she possessed the absolute upper hand. Bullies require a false sense of superiority to make their final fatal mistakes. I needed to feed her ego. I needed her to believe I was exactly the pathetic, destitute failure she always claimed I was. I went to the guest room and opened my laptop. I logged into a secondary checking account I use exclusively for buying minor classroom supplies. The current balance was exactly $1,200. I took a screenshot of the banking page. I used a basic editing program to redact the account number and my home address, making it look like a standard printed statement. I sent the document to the wireless printer located in the upstairs hallway. I retrieved the printed page, folded it in half, and walked back to my canvas overnight bag. I placed the paper inside the outer mesh pocket. I left the zipper intentionally open by 2 inches. The white paper was clearly visible to anyone who happened to look closely at my belongings. It was the perfect, irresistible bait. An hour later, the heavy garage door rumbled open. The family was back from their brunch. I heard their voices echoing in the kitchen. I walked into the adjoining guest bathroom and turned on the shower faucet to create a wall of noise. I stood near the bathroom door, leaving it cracked just a fraction of an inch. I peered through the narrow gap down the hallway. I watched my sister walk past the kitchen island. She paused when she saw my guest room door was open. Vanessa glanced over her shoulder to make sure Beatrice and William were occupied in the living room. She slipped silently into my room. She was snooping, searching for any vulnerability she could exploit after I humiliated them at the dinner table the night before. 2 minutes passed. Vanessa emerged from the guest room. She held her head high. A cruel, triumphant smile played across her lips. She had found the fake bank statement. She read the meager $1,200 balance. She now fully believed I was destitute, weak, and ripe for exploitation. She thought she possessed the leverage to force my submission and pay for her extravagant lifestyle. She had no idea she just swallowed a hook covered in poison. The dinner ambush had failed, but Vanessa was now marching straight toward a new extortion attempt, carrying the exact false confidence I needed her to have. I turned off the shower faucet and reached for a towel. The bathroom was filled with thick steam. I wiped the condensation from the mirror and looked at my reflection. My face was calm and composed. I changed into a fresh set of clothes, choosing a simple beige cardigan and dark trousers. The outfit was intentionally unremarkable. I unlocked the bathroom door and stepped out into the long carpeted hallway. The Leawood mansion felt distinctly different now that I had seen the decay hidden inside the filing cabinets. The vaulted ceilings and the expensive artwork no longer projected wealth. They projected an overwhelming, suffocating desperation. The silence in the house was heavy and loaded with unspoken panic. I walked down the hallway and entered the designer kitchen. Vanessa was waiting for me. She stood leaning against the center granite island. She held a porcelain coffee mug, but she was not drinking from it. She was tapping her manicured fingernails against the ceramic edge in a rapid, erratic rhythm. A predatory gleam shone in her dark eyes. She looked like a hunter who had just cornered a wounded animal. "Caroline," she said. Her voice was sharp and commanding. "We need to have a serious conversation about your future and your obligations to this family." I walked past her toward the stainless steel refrigerator. I pulled out a bottle of sparkling water. I kept my movements slow and deliberate. I twisted the cap off and took a sip. "What about my future, Vanessa?" I asked. She let out a harsh, condescending laugh. "What future?" she countered. "I saw the bank statement you left zipped in your canvas bag. $1,200. That is your entire liquid life savings. You are pushing 40 years old, and you have the net worth of a college freshman. It is pathetic. You are one unexpected medical bill away from total financial ruin." I took another slow sip of my water. I did not act defensive. I did not attempt to justify the fake document. I let my silence encourage her false sense of dominance. "You sit at our formal dining table and demand certified financial disclosures from our father," Vanessa continued. She stepped away from the island and moved closer to me. "You act so high and mighty. You pretend you are morally superior to us. But you are broke, Caroline. You have nothing to your name. Frankly, it is an embarrassment for our family to even acknowledge how far you have fallen." I reached down and subtly tapped the side of my smartwatch. I activated the discrete audio recording function. I rested my wrist casually on the edge of the granite counter, ensuring the small microphone was pointed directly at her face. "What exactly do you want from me, Vanessa?" I asked. She crossed her arms over her chest. "I want you to be useful for once in your miserable life," she said. "Maya has an elite gymnastics conditioning camp in Colorado starting next month. It is a mandatory attendance program if she wants to be seen by the right university athletic recruiters. The tuition for the camp is $15,000. The payment is due in full by the end of this week." I looked at her face. I thought about Maya sitting on the edge of my bed at 2 in the morning. I thought about the 14-year-old girl crying because her wrists ached constantly from the relentless physical abuse her mother demanded. "Maya does not want to go to that conditioning camp," I said smoothly. "Her joints are failing. She needs rest." Vanessa slammed her open hand against the granite countertop. The loud smack echoed through the pristine kitchen. "Do not presume to tell me what my own daughter wants," she snapped. "You do not know the first thing about raising a child for high-level success. You just accept rural mediocrity. Maya is going to that camp in Colorado, and you are going to pay the invoice today." I tilted my head slightly to the side. "How exactly am I supposed to pay for a $15,000 athletic camp with a $1,200 bank account balance?" I asked. Vanessa smiled. It was a cold and deeply calculating expression. "You have zero tangible assets," she said. "But because you never buy anything of value and you live in a cheap farmhouse, you have a pristine credit score. There are short-term lending agencies available online, personal loan providers, payday advance firms. They will approve your application in 10 minutes based on your credit history alone. You are going to apply for a $15,000 loan right now. You will transfer the funds directly to the gymnastics facility. Bradley and I will pay you the monthly installments." She was ordering me to take out a predatory high-interest loan. She wanted me to anchor myself to toxic compounding debt simply to maintain her social illusion and force her injured daughter into a camp she hated. I maintained my icy exterior. I looked her up and down, taking time to evaluate her designer silk blouse and the heavy diamond rings on her fingers. "Bradley is a senior vice president at a regional finance firm," I said quietly. "Why can you not pay for the camp with Bradley's quarterly bonus?" That single question was the trigger. It was a simple, logical inquiry, but it struck the exact center of her deepest, darkest insecurity. Vanessa unraveled. The smug superior posture dissolved in an instant. Her neck flushed a deep mottled red. The veins strained visibly against the thin skin of her throat. She closed the distance between us, stepping aggressively into my personal space. Her voice rose from a conversational tone to a piercing, frantic shriek. "There is no bonus!" she screamed. The audio recorder on my wrist captured every single desperate decibel of her breakdown. "There has not been a bonus in 2 years," Vanessa yelled, waving her arms wildly. "Bradley is useless. His firm is bleeding their top clients, and he is drinking his entire salary away in his home office. We are drowning, Caroline. We are drowning in debt, and everyone is calling us for money every single hour of the day. The country club dues are late, the mortgage is late, the car leases are past due." She gestured frantically toward the vaulted ceiling and the expensive custom cabinetry surrounding us. "Do you think I want to beg my spinster sister for a predatory payday loan?" she shrieked. "Do you think I enjoy looking at your sensible shoes and your cheap clothes in my house? You do not understand high society. You do not understand what it takes to maintain this level of status in Leawood. If we lose this house, we lose everything. We lose our wealthy friends. We lose our gala invitations. We become nothing." I stood perfectly still, letting her hysteria wash over me without absorbing a single drop of it. "You are sacrificing your daughter's physical health for an invitation to a country club gala," I stated flatly. Vanessa let out a guttural sound of pure, unadulterated frustration. She reached out and grabbed my forearm. Her manicured nails dug painfully into my skin. "You are just a credit score to me," she hissed. Her face was inches from mine, her breath hot and ragged. "You are a disposable line of credit. You owe us this money. You have been a profound disappointment to our parents your entire life. You are a selfish, embarrassing failure. You will go online right now and you will take out that loan, or I will make sure our father destroys whatever pathetic teaching career you have left in that farm town." She released my arm and stepped backward, chest heaving as she gasped for air. She had stripped away every single layer of pretense. She had explicitly confessed to their catastrophic financial ruin. She had admitted her husband was a failing alcoholic. She had confirmed her intention to use me as a financial human shield, openly stating that she viewed my stability merely as raw material to burn for her own warmth. I looked down at my wrist. I tapped the small glass screen on my watch. The recording stopped and saved automatically to my encrypted cloud folder. I now had her full unhinged extortion attempt secured. I looked back at my sister. She was panting, staring at me with wide eyes, waiting for my submission. I did not give it to her. I did not argue. I did not defend my career or my life choices. "I will think about your proposal, Vanessa," I said calmly. I picked up my bottle of sparkling water and walked right past her, leaving her standing alone and breathless in her pristine, unpaid kitchen. I walked back towards the front foyer of the house. The trap was now fully baited. My sister believed she had intimidated me into compliance with her screaming fit. My father believed his forged loan application was moving smoothly through the banking system. They were both operating on the fatal assumption that I was a weak, terrified victim who would ultimately surrender to their demands. I reached the entryway just as the heavy mahogany front door swung open from the outside. My father William walked inside. He was not alone. He was accompanied by a man I had never seen before. The stranger wore a cheap, ill-fitting suit and carried a scuffed leather briefcase. He had the nervous, shifty energy of someone who operated in the gray areas of the law. William saw me standing in the hallway. He stopped and pointed a thick, demanding finger at me. "Do not move," my father ordered. "We are finishing the business we started last night." The legal trapdoor was opening beneath my feet, but I already knew exactly how to make them fall through it instead. I stood in the entryway of the Leawood mansion. My father William filled the doorway. He was a large man who used his physical presence to intimidate everyone around him. Beside him stood a man I had never seen before. The stranger was shorter, wearing a cheap gray suit that looked like it came off a discount rack. He clutched a scuffed leather briefcase tightly against his chest. He had the nervous, shifting eyes of a man who spent his career operating in the murky margins of the legal system. "Caroline," My father barked, his voice echoing in the marble foyer. "We are going to the study. We are finishing the business we discussed last night." He did not ask, he commanded. He marched past me, expecting blind obedience. The man in the gray suit scurried after him like an eager subordinate. I did not move immediately. I took a slow breath, centering myself. The trap was set. The bait had been taken. Now they were bringing the documents directly to me. I followed them down the hall, my steps measured and calm. The study was my father's domain whenever he visited Vanessa's house. It was a room designed to project authority, filled with dark wood paneling, heavy leather chairs, and shelves lined with unread law books. It smelled of stale cigar smoke and aggressive cologne. I stepped inside. William immediately moved to stand between me and the closed double doors. He physically blocked my exit. The man in the gray suit scurried around the massive oak desk and set his briefcase down with a dull thud. He fumbled with the brass latches, his hands trembling slightly. "This is Marcus Sterling," William announced, gesturing toward the nervous man. "He is a legal consultant working with my firm. He has drawn up the necessary paperwork to expedite the release of your grandfather's trust." Marcus Sterling did not offer to shake my hand. He avoided eye contact entirely. He pulled a thick stack of legal documents from his briefcase and spread them across the oak desk. He smoothed the top page with sweaty palms. "It is a very straightforward process," Miss Caroline Marcus said. His voice was nasal and rushed. "It is a standard power of attorney declaration. It simply grants your father the temporary authority to act on your behalf regarding the specific assets held in the dormant trust. It streamlines the distribution so we can bypass the lengthy probate hurdles. I just need your signature on the bottom line of page 7. He handed me a sleek, expensive pen. He tapped his index finger eagerly against the signature line. "Sign here, please." They were rushing me. They wanted me to feel overwhelmed by the legal jargon and intimidated by their physical presence. They expected me to blindly sign away my rights just to escape the uncomfortable confrontation. It was a classic high-pressure tactic used by predatory salesmen and desperate con artists. I did not take the pen. I ignored Marcus Sterling entirely. I reached across the desk and picked up the stack of documents. "I am a high school English teacher," I said quietly. "My entire career is built on reading comprehension and analyzing complex texts. I am going to read this document before I sign anything." William's jaw tightened. A muscle twitched near his temple. "We do not have time for this, Caroline," he snapped. "I have business to attend to. Sterling has explained the document. It is standard boilerplate language. Sign the paper so we can all move on." I ignored my father. I began to read. The first 3 pages were indeed standard boilerplate language. They outlined general definitions and jurisdiction parameters. They were designed to lull the reader into a false sense of security. But I did not skip ahead. I read every single word. I scrutinized every clause. I reached page 4. The dense legal jargon shifted. The language became highly specific and incredibly dangerous. I read the paragraph twice to ensure I was not misinterpreting the phrasing. I was not. The intent was crystal clear. I looked up from the document. I placed the papers back on the oak desk. I picked up the expensive pen Marcus had offered me. I tapped the tip of the pen against the center of page 4. "Marcus," I said, keeping my voice perfectly level, "could you please explain section 4 subparagraph B to me?" Marcus flinched. He looked at William, panic flashing in his shifting eyes. William crossed his arms over his chest, his face hardening into a mask of fury. "It is just technical phrasing regarding liability protection," Marcus stammered, rubbing his sweaty palms on his trousers. "It ensures the trust assets are shielded during the transfer process." I smiled. It was a cold, humorless smile. "That is fascinating, Marcus," I replied, "because when I read section 4 subparagraph B, it explicitly states that the signatory, which would be me, legally assumes the role of primary guarantor for all outstanding commercial debts currently held by Bradley's investment firm. It also grants William irrevocable authority to pledge my personal assets as collateral for future commercial loans." The study went dead silent. The only sound was the heavy ticking of the grandfather clock in the corner. This is not a document releasing my grandfather's trust, I stated clearly. This is a document that legally anchors me to millions of dollars of failing corporate debt. You are attempting to make me financially responsible for Bradley's sinking ship and your own collapsing logistics company. William's face turned a violent, terrifying shade of purple. He lunged forward, slamming his heavy fists onto the oak desk, the papers scattered. "You ungrateful little wretch," he screamed. Saliva flew from his mouth. "I gave you life. I fed you. I clothed you. You owe this family. You owe me. You are going to sign that document or I swear I will destroy you." I did not back away. I stood my ground. I looked directly into his enraged eyes. I was no longer the frightened child he could bully into submission. I was the woman who held the match to his entire house of cards. I turned my attention to the nervous lawyer. "Marcus Sterling," I said. "Are you a member of the Kansas Bar Association?" Marcus nodded weakly, his face draining of color. "Yes," he squeaked. "Then you should be intimately familiar with Kansas Statutes Annotated. Chapter 21, Article 58, Section 21, 5824, I said. It outlines the legal definitions and penalties for making false information. Furthermore, presenting a document under false pretenses with the intent to defraud an individual into assuming commercial debt is a federal offense. I leaned closer to Marcus. He shrank back against the heavy leather chair. "If I sign this document, you are a party to wire fraud, bank fraud, and criminal conspiracy," I informed him. "My attorney is fully aware of this meeting. He is currently monitoring a separate fraudulent personal loan application my father submitted yesterday using my forged signature. If you do not pack your briefcase and leave this house right now, I will ensure your name is added to the federal indictment. You will lose your license, and you will go to prison." Marcus Sterling did not hesitate. He did not look at my father. He practically dove across the desk, snatching up the scattered legal documents. He shoved them into his scuffed briefcase, his hands shaking violently. He snapped the brass latches shut and bolted for the door. William shouted after him, demanding he stay, but Marcus was already sprinting down the hallway toward the front entrance. The heavy mahogany door slammed shut, echoing through the silent mansion. I was alone in the study with my father. The patriarch who had terrorized our family for decades was suddenly stripped of his legal weapon and his hired muscle. William stared at me, his chest heaving. He looked confused, as if he could not comprehend how the obedient, embarrassing daughter had suddenly outmaneuvered him. "You are making a terrible mistake, Caroline," he growled, his voice dropping to a menacing whisper. "You are crossing a line you cannot uncross." I picked up my canvas overnight bag from the floor. I walked toward the closed double doors. William tried to block my path, stepping squarely in front of me. I did not stop. I did not hesitate. I walked right up to him, forcing him to either move or physically assault me. He hesitated for a fraction of a second. That was all I needed. I pushed past him, my shoulder brushing against his arm. I opened the heavy doors and stepped out into the hallway. "I am not crossing a line, William," I said without looking back. "I am drawing one." I walked down the long carpeted hallway, leaving my stunned father alone in his dark, smoky study. The legal trapdoor had snapped shut, and he was standing right on top of it. I had the evidence of their fraud. I had the confession of their extortion. I had successfully dismantled their legal ambush. But my work was not finished. The adults were trapped, but the children were still in danger. I needed to leave the toxic mansion and head straight into the heart of Vanessa's social illusion to secure the only two people in this family worth saving. I left my father standing in the study of a mansion he could no longer afford to pretend was his kingdom. I walked out the heavy front doors of the Leawood estate, leaving the suffocating chill of the air conditioning for the sweltering heat of the Kansas afternoon. My 5-year-old sedan was parked precisely where I had left it, an unimposing vehicle hiding an incredibly determined driver. I started the engine and backed out of the stamped concrete driveway. I had dismantled the legal ambush designed to enslave my future, but the immediate threat to Leo and Maya still hung over them like a guillotine. I navigated through the labyrinth of manicured subdivisions heading toward the commercial district. I was not driving back to Cottonwood Falls. I was driving toward the elite prep academy where my niece and nephew spent their days. The academy sat on a sprawling, idyllic campus that looked more like a small liberal arts college than a high school. Red brick buildings with ivy creeping up the walls, pristine athletic fields, and a fleet of luxury vehicles populating the student parking lot. I parked my car in a visitor spot and walked toward the main administrative building. I did not possess an appointment, but I knew the operational rhythm of private educational institutions. When money is involved, administrators suddenly find room in their schedules. I approached the receptionist, a young woman wearing a headset and an expression of practiced professional distance. "Good afternoon," I said, maintaining a warm but authoritative tone. "My name is Caroline. I am the aunt of Leo and Maya. I need to speak with the headmaster regarding their enrollment status." The receptionist typed briefly on her keyboard, her eyebrows knitting together in a slight frown. "I am sorry, miss," she said. "Headmaster Sterling is currently occupied. Furthermore, we can only discuss student accounts with primary legal guardians." I anticipated this hurdle. I leaned slightly forward, placing my hands flat on the high counter. "I understand your policy," I replied smoothly. "However, I am not here to discuss their academic performance. I am here to resolve their outstanding financial balance. If you could please inform Headmaster Sterling that I am prepared to clear the 90-day delinquency on both accounts immediately, I am confident he will make time for a brief meeting." The receptionist paused, her fingers hovering over the keyboard. The magic words had been spoken. Financial institutions, even educational ones, run on cash flow. She picked up a desk phone, pressed a single button, and murmured a few quick sentences. She hung up and offered a much more genuine smile. "Headmaster Sterling will see you now," she said, gesturing toward a set of double oak doors. I walked into the spacious office. Headmaster Sterling was a tall, distinguished man in his late 50s, projecting an air of genteel authority. He stood up from behind a massive cherrywood desk, gesturing for me to sit in one of the leather guest chairs. A woman I recognized from the school directory as the senior guidance counselor, Mrs. Albright, sat adjacent to the desk, clutching a thick file folder. "Thank you for seeing me without an appointment, Headmaster." I began taking my seat. "Please call me Arthur," he replied, returning to his chair. "To be completely candid, Caroline, we are in a very difficult position regarding your niece and nephew. Leo and Maya are excellent students. They are polite, engaged, and a credit to this academy. However, we are an independent institution that relies entirely on tuition." Mrs. Albright opened her folder, adjusting her glasses. "We have made numerous attempts to contact Bradley and Vanessa over the past 3 months," she added softly. "We have sent emails, certified letters, and left voicemails. The communications have been entirely ignored. We have reached the critical deadline. According to our bylaws, if the outstanding balance is not settled by close of business, tomorrow we have no choice but to initiate formal disenrollment procedures." The confirmation settled heavily in my chest. Leo had not exaggerated the severity of the situation. His parents were so paralyzed by their collapsing illusion that they were willingly allowing their children to be publicly humiliated and expelled rather than admit their financial failure. "I understand the position you have been forced into," I said, keeping my voice steady and professional. "I am not here to request an extension. I am here to remove the burden entirely." I unzipped my canvas bag and pulled out a leather portfolio. Inside were 2 items. The first was a cashier's check drawn directly from the operating account of Vantage Consulting, LLC. It was made out to the Academy for the exact amount required to clear the past due balance, plus the remaining tuition required to secure both children through the end of the academic year. The second item was a single sheet of paper, a legal directive drafted by my attorney, David. I slid the cashier's check across the wide cherry wood desk. Headmaster Sterling looked down at the slip of paper. His eyes widened slightly as he registered the high 5-figure amount printed across the center line. He looked up at me, clearly struggling to reconcile the unassuming woman sitting in his office with the substantial financial instrument resting on his desk. "This clears their entire balance for the year," he murmured, almost to himself. "This is an extraordinary gesture, Caroline." I slid the second piece of paper across the desk, placing it next to the check. "There is one non-negotiable condition attached to this payment," I stated firmly. Headmaster Sterling picked up the directive, reading the text carefully. Mrs. Albright leaned over to scan the document as well. The document legally stipulates that the source of this payment must remain strictly confidential until the end of the week, I explained. You will process the payment. You will update Leo and Maya's accounts to reflect a zero balance. You will inform the children that they are no longer facing expulsion. However, if Bradley or Vanessa contact this office, you are legally bound to inform them only that the balance has been cleared by a third-party benefactor. You may not reveal my name or the name of my consulting firm under any circumstances. Mrs. Albright looked at me, a profound sadness entering her eyes. She had likely seen the devastating effects of toxic parenting before recognizing the silent battle I was fighting to protect the kids from being used as leverage by their own mother and father. We can absolutely honor this directive, Headmaster Sterling said, signing his name at the bottom of the document. He pulled a copy from his printer and handed it to me for my records. I appreciate your discretion, I said, standing up and returning the copy to my portfolio. Leo and Maya need stability right now, not a public spectacle. As I turned toward the door, Mrs. Albright stood up. Caroline, she called out softly. I paused, looking back at the guidance counselor. Those children carry a tremendous amount of anxiety, she said, her voice filled with genuine empathy. We see it in the hallways. We see it in their posture. Whatever is happening in their home, they are absorbing the impact. Thank you for stepping in. They need someone who actually sees them. I offered a small appreciative nod. I see them, I promised. And they are going to be fine. I walked out of the administrative building and back to my car. The Kansas heat felt less oppressive now. The heaviest burden had been lifted. The children were secure. Their education and their immediate stability were guaranteed, locked behind a legal wall their parents could not breach. The defensive maneuvers were complete. The legal trapdoor had been avoided, the financial safety net had been deployed, and the kids were safe. Now it was time to pivot to the offensive strategy. I drove back towards the Leawood mansion. The summer gala was rapidly approaching. Beatrice and Vanessa were currently obsessing over floral arrangements and seating charts, desperate to project the perfect image of a wealthy, untouchable family. They believed they were hosting the social event of the season, a lavish celebration of their own success. They had no idea they were actually organizing the stage for their own public reckoning. The illusion was about to be shattered in front of everyone they were trying so desperately to impress. The Leawood Country Club sits on 200 acres of pristine real estate, featuring an 18-hole championship golf course and a clubhouse designed to resemble a French chateau. It is an exclusive sanctuary where generational wealth mingles with aggressive new money. Membership requires a six-figure initiation fee and a relentless commitment to maintaining a flawless public image. It is the exact location Vanessa and Beatrice chose to host their highly anticipated summer gala. They rented the grand ballroom, complete with crystal chandeliers and floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking the 18th green. I arrived at the country club at 6 in the evening. I parked my reliable sedan near the back of the lot, far away from the valet stand, where the luxury European cars were lining up. I walked toward the entrance, the Kansas humidity already fading into a warm, comfortable evening. I carried a small clutch purse and maintained a posture of serene confidence. Inside the clubhouse, the atmosphere was suffocating. The air was thick with the scent of expensive perfume and the desperate underlying anxiety of people trying too hard to impress each other. The grand ballroom was a spectacle of financial irresponsibility. Massive floral arrangements towered over linen-draped tables. A string quartet played softly in the corner. Waiters carrying silver trays of champagne circulated through the growing crowd of Leawood elite. I knew, based on the documents sitting in my secure cloud folder, that Bradley funded this entire production using multiple high-interest credit cards already pushed to their absolute limits. They were financing their own funeral pyre to keep the neighborhood warm. I found my family holding court near the center of the room. William was shaking hands with local politicians, projecting the image of a booming logistics magnate. Bradley stood near the bar, already nursing his second scotch, his smile tight and brittle. Vanessa wore a stunning custom-tailored emerald green gown that easily cost $5,000. She was laughing too loudly at a joke told by the chief of surgery from the local hospital board, her primary target for the evening. Beatrice spotted me. She broke away from a group of wealthy retirees and marched in my direction. She wore a champagne-colored silk dress and a necklace of heavy pearls. She looked me up and down, her expression instantly souring. I chose my outfit for the evening very deliberately. I wore a simple, structured navy dress I purchased off the rack 5 years ago. It was not ugly, but it was profoundly ordinary. It lacked any designer labels or eye-catching embellishments. I paired it with plain black heels and minimal jewelry. It was the exact uniform of the unpretentious country mouse they expected me to be. Caroline, Beatrice hissed, keeping her voice low so the surrounding guests could not hear her vitriol. I explicitly told you to wear the coral dress I sent to your room. That navy thing is dreadful. It makes you look like a librarian attending a funeral. You are embarrassing your sister on her most important night. I did not apologize. I did not attempt to defend my wardrobe choices. I let her criticism slide off me like water over stone. The coral dress she provided was a shapeless, hideous garment, intentionally selected to make me look frumpy and inferior next to Vanessa's emerald gown. It was a visual tactic designed to reinforce the family hierarchy in front of their social circle. I simply refused to wear the costume she assigned me. I prefer the navy. Beatrice, I said calmly. It is comfortable. My mother sighed heavily, a sound of profound martyrdom. Fine, she snapped. We do not have time to fix you now. The schedule is tight. At 8 o'clock, William will deliver the welcome address. Following that, I will introduce the family legacy presentation. Your role is simple. When I call your name, you will walk up to the stage. You will carry the engraved crystal plaque I left in the cloakroom. You will hand it to Vanessa, and you will smile for the photographer. Do you understand the instructions, Caroline? The psychological cruelty of her plan was breathtakingly transparent. The Family Legacy Award was a completely manufactured honor. It did not actually exist. Beatrice invented it solely for this gala. The goal was to force me, the designated failure, to publicly crown Vanessa, the golden child, as the superior sibling in front of hundreds of people. They wanted to use my submission to validate their own fragile egos and cement Vanessa's status as the reigning matriarch of their social circle. They believed forcing me onto that stage would finally break my spirit and guarantee my compliance regarding the forged financial documents. I offered my mother a small, agreeable smile. I understand the instructions perfectly, Beatrice, I replied. I will be ready when you call my name. Excellent, she said, her tone dripping with false sweetness. Try to mingle near the back of the room until then. Do not engage anyone in prolonged conversation. We want the focus entirely on your sister tonight. Beatrice turned on her heel and glided back toward the center of the ballroom, her public smile instantly reappearing. I walked toward the perimeter of the room, taking a glass of sparkling water from a passing waiter. I found a quiet spot near one of the large windows overlooking the golf course. I scanned the ballroom, analyzing the crowd. The guest list was a who is who of Leawood high society: surgeons, corporate executives, local developers, and influential politicians. These were the people Vanessa and Bradley desperately needed to impress to secure their future. These were the people they believed would save them from the crushing debt hiding in their bottom filing cabinet drawer. My phone vibrated in my clutch purse. I pulled it out and looked at the screen. The message was from my attorney, David. The text was brief, clinical, and devastating. Fraud alert triggered. The financial institution processed the forged application. The funds bounced against our security hold. The attempt is officially logged. The FBI Cybercrimes Division has been forwarded the forged loan documents and the IP tracking data. The federal paper trail is secure. I read the words twice to ensure my eyes were not playing tricks on me in the dim light of the ballroom. They were not. My father had actually done it. He had pushed the button. He had crossed the line from a desperate, aggressive bully into a documented federal criminal. The legal trapdoor had not just opened, it had slammed shut, locking him inside. I felt a profound sense of finality settle over me. The anxiety I carried for the last 48 hours evaporated. I was no longer playing defense against a family trying to destroy me. I held the undeniable proof of their crimes in the palm of my hand. I slipped the phone back into my purse. I reached into the small interior pocket, and my fingers brushed against a smooth metallic object. It was a secure encrypted flash drive. I did not spend the afternoon resting in my guest room. I spent it compiling the digital armory I built over the last 2 days. The flash drive contained the high-resolution photographs of the foreclosure notices. It contained the audio recording of Vanessa screaming about their bankruptcy and demanding I take out a predatory loan. It contained the digital receipt from Headmaster Sterling, proving I paid the children's tuition to save them from expulsion. And now, it also contained the forwarded email from David, confirming my father's federal wire fraud attempt. The string quartet finished their set. The ambient noise in the ballroom began to shift as the country club manager signaled the staff to prepare for the speeches. The guests started to gravitate toward the rows of elegant chairs arranged in front of the elevated stage at the far end of the room. I watched William walk toward the podium, adjusting his tie and projecting his chest. He looked like a man who believed he owned the entire world. He had no idea his logistics firm was about to be seized by federal investigators. I watched Vanessa laughing with the hospital board members, her emerald dress catching the light from the chandeliers. She had no idea her children were already packing their bags. I did not go to the cloakroom to retrieve the engraved crystal plaque Beatrice told me to carry. I did not need a manufactured award to deliver my presentation. I walked slowly toward the front of the room, holding my small clutch purse, my hand resting firmly on the encrypted flash drive. The audience was taking their seats, waiting with breathless anticipation for the evening's entertainment. They were expecting a celebration of generational wealth and familial devotion. They were about to witness the spectacular, highly documented demolition of a toxic empire, and the country mouse was holding the detonator. The country club ballroom pulsed with a chaotic manufactured joy. Hundreds of Leawood's elite were drinking champagne and congratulating each other on their shared superiority. I slipped away from the edge of the room and walked down a quiet, carpeted hallway toward the cloakroom. The space was lined with heavy oak hangers and smelled faintly of expensive wool and damp cedar. I needed a moment of absolute silence to execute the final logistical maneuvers of my plan. I stepped inside the dimly lit room and pulled my phone from my clutch purse. I opened a secure messaging application. I initiated a group text with Leo and Maya. "Are you both in position?" I typed. The response came almost instantly from Leo. "Yes. We are standing by the side exit near the kitchen doors. Nobody is paying attention to us. The overnight bags are locked in the trunk of your car." I took a slow, centering breath. "Good," I replied. "Do not move. Stay out of sight until you hear me speak into the microphone. Once the presentation begins, keep your eyes on the side exit. If anyone tries to stop you, ignore them and walk out. I will meet you at the car." Maya sent a quick response. "We trust you, Aunt Caroline." I locked the screen. The children were secure. The escape route was established. The only remaining task was to dismantle the illusion protecting their parents. I noticed a small notification icon on my phone screen indicating a missed call and a new voicemail. I checked the timestamp. The call had come in exactly 1 hour ago while I was driving to the country club. The caller ID displayed William's mobile number. I pressed the phone to my ear and tapped the play button. My father's voice filled my ear. He was not shouting. He was speaking in a low, measured tone that was far more dangerous than his usual roaring temper. This was the voice he used when he was actively plotting the destruction of an adversary. "Caroline," he began, his words clipped and precise. "I do not know what kind of game you think you are playing with the legal documents in my study. But you need to understand the reality of your situation. You are going to walk onto that stage tonight. You are going to present the award to your sister. You are going to smile and you are going to play the role of the supportive family member. If you attempt to humiliate us, if you utter one single word out of turn, I will personally ensure you never teach in the state of Kansas again. I know the superintendent in your district. I know the school board members. I will manufacture a scandal so severe you will lose your license and your pension. Do not test me. This is your final warning." I listened to the message twice. He was threatening to obliterate my livelihood to protect his own fraudulent empire. He believed his influence extended beyond the borders of Leawood and could crush me in Cottonwood Falls. He was entirely unaware that my teaching career was merely a vocation I loved, not a financial necessity holding me hostage. I did not delete the voicemail. I saved the audio file and immediately uploaded it to my encrypted cloud folder, adding it to the growing arsenal of evidence. I now possess documented proof of extortion from both my sister and my father. They had essentially handed me the ropes they intended to use to hang themselves. I smoothed my simple navy dress and stepped out of the cloakroom. The ambient noise of the gala washed over me. I walked back down the hallway toward the grand ballroom. The atmosphere had shifted. The string quartet had stopped playing. The guests were beginning to migrate toward the rows of chairs arranged in front of the elevated stage. The evening was transitioning from a cocktail hour into a formal presentation. I moved toward the back of the room, intending to find a quiet vantage point near the audiovisual controls. I did not make it far. A heavy hand clamped down on my shoulder. I turned. Bradley stood directly behind me. He swayed slightly on his expensive Italian leather shoes. He held a highball glass filled with amber liquid. The smell of expensive scotch and stale sweat rolled off him in a suffocating wave. His eyes were bloodshot and his face was flushed. The polished executive I met at Thanksgiving years ago was entirely gone, replaced by a desperate cornered man drowning in his own bad decisions. Caroline, he slurred, his grip tightening painfully on my shoulder. You look like you belong behind the catering tables. I did not attempt to pull away. I looked calmly at his hand, then up at his face. I was not intimidated by a failing alcoholic trying to project dominance. What do you want, Bradley? I asked quietly. He leaned in closer. His hot breath brushed against my cheek. I know what you did in my office, he whispered, his voice thick with venom. I saw the filing cabinet was unlocked. You think you are so smart. You think you can pry into my business and judge me. You are nothing but a pathetic spinster loser. You have no husband. You have no money. You have no power here. You are going to get up on that stage and you are going to do exactly what Beatrice tells you to do. Because if you do not, I will make sure you regret ever stepping foot in this house. He was terrified. He knew I possessed the financial documents proving his ruin. He was trying to use verbal abuse to force me back into the role of the submissive, silent scapegoat. He needed me to fold so he could maintain the illusion of his success for just a few more hours. I looked at the desperate man gripping my shoulder. I did not raise my voice. I did not show anger. I reached up with my free hand. I placed my fingers gently on his silk tie. I adjusted the knot, pulling it slightly tighter against his collar. I patted his chest firmly. You are right, Bradley, I whispered, keeping my tone perfectly conversational. I am just a simple public school teacher. I do not understand high finance, but I do understand cause and effect. I met his bloodshot eyes. Watch the screens, Bradley, I said. Just watch the screens. I stepped out from under his heavy hand. He stumbled slightly, thrown off balance by my sudden movement. I did not look back. I continued walking toward the front of the ballroom, merging seamlessly into the crowd of wealthy guests taking their seats. The country club manager stepped up to the podium on the elevated stage. He tapped the microphone. A sharp feedback whine cut through the murmuring crowd, demanding silence. The guests settled into their chairs, turning their attention toward the front of the room. The lights dimmed slightly. The large projector screen hanging behind the podium glowed a pristine, empty white. The tension in the ballroom was palpable. Beatrice stood near the front row, adjusting her pearl necklace and projecting an air of regal satisfaction. Vanessa sat beside her, her emerald gown shimmering under the stage lights, waiting to receive her manufactured crown. William stood near the bar chest, puffed out, preparing to deliver his welcome address as the benevolent patriarch. They believed they had successfully contained the threat. They believed their threats and their psychological manipulation had forced me into compliance. They were expecting a coronation. I stood near the edge of the stage, my hand resting firmly on the encrypted flash drive in my clutch purse. The air in the room felt charged, like the heavy static atmosphere right before a violent thunderstorm breaks across the Kansas plains. The country club manager welcomed the guests and introduced my father. William strode confidently up the stairs to the podium. The calm before the strike had officially ended. The demolition was about to begin. William gripped the edges of the wooden podium. He delivered a booming, self-congratulatory welcome address that praised his own logistics company as a foundational pillar of the local economy. The applause from the hundreds of seated guests was thunderous and entirely unearned. He stepped back from the microphone, his chest puffed out with arrogant pride, and gestured for his wife to take his place. Beatrice glided across the elevated stage. She adjusted the microphone stand with manicured fingers. The grand ballroom settled into an expectant hush. The guests leaned forward in their chairs. These were the surgeons, real estate developers, and corporate executives of Leawood. They held crystal champagne flutes and wore tailored tuxedos. They thrived on social hierarchy and expected a presentation that validated their own wealth. My mother began with a story about raising two very different daughters. She painted a picture of a household where ambition was the ultimate virtue and success was the only acceptable currency. I stood near the edge of the stage, listening to her revise our family history in real time. She described Vanessa as a shooting star, destined for greatness, from the moment she took her first steps. She listed Vanessa's charity board appointments and her flawless taste in interior design as if they were Nobel Prizes. The audience nodded in appreciative agreement. They recognized their own vanity, reflected in her glowing words. Then Beatrice turned her gaze toward me. The spotlight caught the heavy pearls resting at her throat. "And then we have Caroline," she said, her voice dropping to a tone of weaponized pity. A quiet murmur rippled through the front rows. People adjusted their seating, preparing for the dramatic contrast. Caroline chose a different path. Beatrice continued, offering the crowd a sad maternal smile. She chose a simple, humble life in the rural countryside. She teaches in a small public school, content with the quiet existence of a country mouse. It takes a special kind of person to accept a life without grandeur, to stand in the shadows so others can shine. We are so thrilled she drove all the way here in her practical little car to celebrate the true success of this family. The guests offered a polite, condescending smattering of applause. It was the kind of clapping reserved for a charity case. I felt the weight of hundreds of pitying stares landing on my plain navy dress. Vanessa sat in the front row, beaming. Her emerald gown caught the light as she adjusted her posture, readying herself to accept the ultimate validation. She looked at me with open triumph. She believed she had won the lifelong competition our parents orchestrated. She believed my presence on this stage would permanently cement her status as the superior sibling. "Caroline, please come up here," Beatrice instructed into the microphone. "Please come present the inaugural Family Legacy Award to your extraordinary sister." I stepped forward. I did not rush my movements. I walked up the short flight of carpeted stairs to the stage. My flat shoes made no sound against the floorboards. Every eye in the vast room tracked my movement. I could see the sweat beading on Bradley's forehead from where he sat next to his wife. He gripped his empty highball glass so tightly his knuckles were stark white. He knew I held the power to destroy him, but he still hoped my lifelong conditioning would force me into submission. He was praying I lacked the spine to strike back. I reached the center of the stage. Beatrice offered me a tight, artificial smile and stepped aside. A small wooden table sat next to the podium. Resting on top of it was a heavy engraved crystal plaque. It caught the glare of the spotlight, reflecting the manufactured lie of the entire evening. I did not reach for the crystal. I did not even look at it. I stepped up to the podium and placed my hands firmly on either side of the wood. I looked out over the sea of expectant faces. The silence in the ballroom deepened. The polite murmurs ceased entirely. The guests sensed a shift in the atmosphere. They expected a nervous, stuttering tribute from a cowed sibling. They received a woman standing with the immovable posture of a judge, about to read a final verdict. I found my father in the crowd. William stood near the back, near the bar doors. His arms crossed, his eyes burning with a silent, menacing warning. I held his gaze for 3 full seconds, letting him see the profound absence of fear in my eyes. His arms slowly uncrossed. A flicker of uncertainty passed over his harsh features. My mother is correct, I said into the microphone. My voice did not shake. It carried through the sophisticated sound system, filling every corner of the expansive room with crisp, authoritative clarity. I do live a simple life, I continued. I spend my days teaching literature to teenagers in a town many of you would consider flyover country. We spend a lot of time analyzing narratives in my classroom. We study how authors construct facades. We examine how characters build elaborate illusions to hide their deepest, most profound failures. A wave of confusion washed over the front rows. Beatrice took a hesitant step toward me, her brow furrowing. This was not the script she wrote. This was not the submissive display she demanded. In literature, the truth always eventually breaks through the surface, I said, projecting my voice to reach the very back of the hall. The truth does not care about the cost of your designer dress. It does not care about the size of your stone house or the prestige of your country club membership. The truth is a relentless force, and it only requires a single spark to burn an entire illusion to the ground. I reached into my small clutch purse. My fingers closed around the cold metal of the encrypted flash drive. I pulled it out and held it up for a brief moment, letting the silver casing catch the stage lights. Vanessa's smile vanished instantly. She sat bolt upright in her chair. The triumph in her dark eyes morphed into sheer, unadulterated terror. She recognized the shape of a weapon when she saw one. Bradley dropped his glass. It landed on the carpeted floor with a dull thud, the sound echoing in the quiet room. My family asked me to speak about success tonight, I said, my voice dropping to a tone of cold, surgical precision. They gathered you all here to celebrate their legacy and their unparalleled prosperity. So let us honor their request. Let us look at the numbers. The podium was equipped with a sleek digital interface meant for corporate presentations. I located the universal serial bus port on the side of the console. I inserted the flash drive. The digital connection chimed softly through the overhead speakers. I tapped the touchscreen panel, selecting the master file I spent the afternoon organizing in my guest room. The heavy projector suspended from the vaulted ceiling hummed to life. The massive white screen dropping down behind me flickered. The guests held their collective breath. They expected a touching slideshow of childhood photographs, tropical vacations, and smiling family portraits. They expected a heartwarming visual tribute to accompany the Crystal Award, sitting ignored on the side table. The screen flashed bright white, illuminating the stunned faces of the Leawood elite. Then the first high-resolution image snapped into razor-sharp focus, towering 20 feet high for everyone in the room to read. It was not a family memory. It was the first page of a meticulously documented demolition. The projector hummed loudly in the dead silence of the ballroom. The image on the screen snapped into high-definition focus. It was not a curated family portrait or a montage of tropical vacations. It was a scanned legal document, towering 20 feet high, bathed in the unforgiving glare of the projector light. The bold red lettering across the top of the document was impossible to miss. Notice of default. Final warning. I had cropped the image slightly to ensure the property address and the names on the mortgage were perfectly centered. The Leawood estate, the very house my sister used to lord her superiority over everyone in this room, was explicitly named. The outstanding balance listed in the center of the page was staggering. The reaction from the audience was immediate and visceral. A collective gasp rippled through the front rows. The chief of surgery, who had been laughing with Vanessa minutes ago, leaned forward, his brow furrowing as he read the numbers. The wealthy retirees Beatrice courted so aggressively began whispering furiously behind their hands. The facade of untouchable prosperity was instantly fractured. Vanessa sprang to her feet. The emerald gown seemed to lose its luster as her face drained of all color. "Turn it off!" she shrieked, her voice cracking. Her polished demeanor vanished, replaced by sheer, unadulterated panic. "That is fake! She fabricated that!" I did not respond to her outburst. I calmly tapped the touchpad on the podium. The screen wiped to the next image. This document was far more damaging than a simple foreclosure notice. It was the personal loan application my father submitted to the bank. I had highlighted two specific sections in bright yellow. The first highlight illuminated my social security number and my forged signature on the guarantor line. The second highlight illuminated the routing instructions directing the requested $150,000 straight into the operating account of Williams' logistics firm. "This is a federal loan application," I stated into the microphone, my voice cutting through the rising murmur of the crowd. "It was submitted 24 hours ago. The signature on the bottom line is not mine." My father, the man who just gave a speech about building a legacy, attempted to steal my financial identity to bail out his failing company. The murmurs evolved into a loud, buzzing commotion. The guests were no longer just shocked. They were witnessing a felony unfold in real time. William stood paralyzed near the bar doors. His chest heaved, but he made no move to deny the accusation. The undeniable proof of his desperation was projected in black and white for his entire social circle to read. Bradley finally reacted. The alcohol in his system fueled a reckless, aggressive surge. He shoved his chair back so violently it tipped over and crashed onto the floor. "You lying witch!" he roared. His face flushed a dangerous red. He lunged toward the stage, his fists clenched, intent on physically removing me from the podium. I was prepared for the escalation. I tapped the touchpad twice in rapid succession. I did not advance to another image. I triggered an audio file. The ballroom's sophisticated surround sound system, rented specifically to ensure every guest heard Beatrice's manufactured praise, now worked perfectly to broadcast their ruin. Vanessa's voice echoed through the vast hall. It was not the sweet, measured tone she used for cocktail parties. It was the hysterical, screeching pitch she used in the privacy of her kitchen. "There is no bonus," the recorded voice screamed, vibrating against the crystal chandeliers. "There has not been a bonus in 2 years. Bradley is useless. His firm is bleeding their top clients, and he is drinking his entire salary away in his home office. We are drowning, Caroline. We are drowning in debt, and everyone is calling us for money every single hour of the day." Bradley froze mid-stride, his foot landing heavily on the bottom step of the stage. The sound of his wife explicitly confirming his professional failure and his alcoholism stopped him faster than a physical barrier. He stared up at the speakers, his expression crumbling from aggressive rage into abject humiliation. The recording continued to play, capturing the essence of their extortion attempt. "We are bankrupt, you idiot. Just take out the loan," the recorded Vanessa demanded. "If we lose this house, we lose everything. We lose our wealthy friends. We lose our gala invitations. We become nothing." The audio file ended. The silence that followed was suffocating. The guests did not whisper. They did not move. They stared at the Golden family with expressions ranging from profound disgust to chilling detachment. In a community where status was the only metric of worth, Vanessa had just publicly confessed that her entire life was a debt-fueled mirage. She had openly admitted to using the very people in this room as props to validate her empty existence. Beatrice broke the silence. She scrambled toward the side of the stage, her high heels clicking frantically against the floorboards. "Turn off the power," she shrieked at the country club manager standing near the audio-visual cart. "Pull the plug right now." The manager, recognizing the catastrophic liability unfolding in his venue, stepped back and raised his hands, refusing to intervene in the domestic demolition. I gripped the edges of the podium. The time for defense was over. It was time to rewrite the family narrative permanently. For my entire adult life, my mother told anyone who would listen that I was a failure, I said, projecting my voice over Beatrice's frantic demands. She called me the family cautionary tale, because I chose to teach high school English in a rural town instead of chasing empty prestige. She mocked my salary and my sensible clothes. I tapped the touchpad one final time. The screen transitioned to a new document. It was a certified financial statement from Vantage Consulting LLC. I had redacted the sensitive routing numbers, but the bottom line was clearly visible. The total assets listed were in the high 6 figures, dwarfing the combined net worth of everyone currently standing in the front row. "I am the founder and sole proprietor of an elite educational consulting firm," I announced to the stunned audience. "I built a highly successful business in the shadows because I knew my family would demand a cut of my success while continuing to mock my vocation. I do not live in a modest farmhouse because I lack ambition. I live there because I prefer peace over pretense. Vanessa was hyperventilating, clutching her chest, as the reality of my hidden wealth washed over her. She realized the sister she had bullied for decades possessed the exact financial stability she had spent her entire life faking. I am not the cautionary tale. I continued my gaze sweeping across the front rows until I locked eyes with my mother. I am the only reason this illusion has not completely collapsed. I pressed the forwards arrow on the presentation clicker. The final receipt appeared on the massive screen. It was the official ledger from the Elite Prep Academy. It displayed a zero balance for both Leo and Maya. Yesterday afternoon, I personally paid the full year's tuition for my niece and nephew. I stated the cold facts landing like heavy stones in the silent ballroom. Bradley and Vanessa stopped paying their children's school fees 3 months ago. Leo and Maya were facing immediate expulsion for non-payment. Their parents were willing to let their children be publicly humiliated and thrown out of school, all while funneling their last remaining lines of credit to host this very gala. A collective murmur of revulsion rose from the crowd. The financial fraud and the forged loans were shocking, but the willful neglect of their own children violated a fundamental social code. The wealthy guests looked at William Beatrice Bradley and Vanessa not just as frauds, but as profoundly broken people. I paid the tuition to protect the children from the consequences of their parents' narcissism, I concluded. I did not come here tonight to present an award. I came here to return the shame this family has tried to force on me for 38 years. I unplugged the flash drive from the podium console. The massive screen behind me instantly went black. The sudden absence of the glaring light made the ballroom feel stark and unforgiving. The demolition was complete. The receipts had been delivered. The illusion was reduced to ash. But the most important conflict of the night was still unresolved. The adults were ruined, but the children still needed to make their choice. The black screen hung behind me like a void. The visual evidence of the family's ruin was gone, but the undeniable impact remained seared into the minds of every guest in the room. The silence was thick and oppressive, broken only by the ragged breathing of the people I had just systematically dismantled. William could not tolerate the vacuum. He was a man who required absolute control, and I had just publicly stripped him of every last ounce of it. He needed a scapegoat. He needed to reassert his dominance over the narrative before the whispers of the Leawood elite turned into a deafening roar of condemnation. He pushed away from the barred doors, his heavy footsteps echoing across the hardwood floor as he marched toward the front of the ballroom. His face was a mask of desperate, cornered fury. He pointed a thick, accusatory finger directly at me. "Do not listen to a single word she says," William bellowed, his voice raw and cracking under the strain. "She is completely unstable. She fabricated those documents. She has always been jealous of Vanessa. She is trying to destroy this family because she is a bitter, lonely woman who cannot stand to see anyone else succeed." He swung his gaze wildly around the room, searching for any sign of agreement from the stunned audience. Finding none, he pivoted his focus to the side of the room. He had spotted movement near the kitchen exit. Leo and Maya had emerged from the hallway. They stood together near the heavy double doors, their overnight bags resting on the floor beside them. They had witnessed the entire presentation. They had seen the irrefutable proof of their parents' deception and my corresponding defense. William saw them and seized what he believed was his final remaining opportunity to project authority. He believed he could command their loyalty through sheer volume and intimidation, assuming the lifelong conditioning of the family hierarchy would force them to obey. "Leo!" Maya, William roared, gesturing frantically for them to come to the front of the room. "Get away from her right now. Come here. Your aunt is insane. We are leaving." Vanessa, still hyperventilating in the front row, finally found her voice. She scrambled to her feet, her emerald gown twisting around her legs. She reached her arms out toward her children, her face contorted in a mask of manufactured maternal panic. "Listen to your grandfather," Vanessa shrieked, her voice echoing shrilly in the expansive ballroom. "Get over here right now. We are going home." They expected the children to cower. They expected Leo and Maya to lower their heads, pick up their bags, and march obediently back into the toxic illusion. They believed the fear of public embarrassment would outweigh their desire for safety. They were entirely wrong. Leo did not move toward his mother. He did not flinch at his grandfather's roar. He stood perfectly still for a moment, his jaw set with a determination I had never seen in him before. He looked at Maya, offering her a brief, reassuring nod. Then he reached down, picked up his overnight bag, and slung the strap over his shoulder. He stepped away from the exit. He did not walk toward his parents. He walked directly toward the elevated stage where I was standing. The crowd watched in breathless fascination. This was not a carefully orchestrated family drama playing out behind closed doors. This was a very public, very real fracture happening right in front of them. The teenager, the supposed beneficiary of all this manufactured wealth, was moving with deliberate purpose against the current of his family's demands. Leo climbed the short flight of stairs. He did not look at Vanessa or Bradley. He walked up to the podium. I stepped back, offering him the space. He reached out and grasped the microphone with a steady hand. He pulled it from the stand, holding it close to his mouth. He looked out over the sea of wealthy faces. These were the people his parents had prioritized over his own well-being. These were the people who had unwittingly funded his misery. "My grandfather is lying," Leo said. His voice was not loud. It was not angry. It possessed a quiet, devastating dignity that commanded absolute attention. He spoke with the clear, unvarnished honesty that only comes from someone who has nothing left to lose. "My Aunt Caroline did not fabricate anything." Leo continued, his gaze sweeping across the room. "Every single document she showed you tonight is real. I know because I have seen the collection notices. I have answered the phone when the bank calls. My sister and I have lived in a state of constant fear for the last 2 years while my parents pretended everything was perfect." He paused, taking a slow breath. He looked down at Vanessa, who was staring up at him with wide, horrified eyes. "You stopped paying my tuition 3 months ago," Leo stated, addressing his mother directly. "You were willing to let me be expelled and humiliated just so you could pay for the floral arrangements in this room tonight. You force Maya to train until she cries because you think a scholarship is the only way to maintain your status. You do not care about us. You only care about how we make you look." A low murmur of shock rippled through the audience. The financial fraud was a scandal, but the public condemnation from a 16-year-old son was a tragedy. The Leawood elite were watching the utter collapse of the family unit they had previously envied. Leo turned his head and looked at me. His expression softened. "Aunt Caroline is the only one who actually cares if we survive," he said, his voice ringing with absolute conviction. "She paid my tuition. She secured our college funds. She is the only reason we have any kind of future left." He turned back to the crowd, his posture straightening. "My sister and I are not going back to that house," Leo announced, his words carrying a finality that brooked no argument. "We have spoken with an attorney. We are filing for legal emancipation from our parents. We are leaving Leawood tonight, and we are going to live in Kansas with our aunt." The impact of his statement hit the room like a physical blow. Emancipation was not a casual threat. It was a severe legal maneuver that required documented proof of neglect or abuse. By publicly declaring their intent, Leo had essentially confirmed everything I had exposed. He had provided the ultimate irrefutable testimony against his own parents. Vanessa let out a sharp, agonizing wail. Her legs seemed to lose all strength. She collapsed onto the carpeted floor of the ballroom, her expensive emerald gown pooling around her in a chaotic mess. She buried her face in her hands, her shoulders shaking violently. She was not weeping for the loss of her children. She was weeping for the loss of her props. She realized in that exact moment that she possessed nothing left to leverage. The illusion was gone, the money was gone, and now the children were gone. She was entirely exposed, and the audience she coveted so desperately was watching her break. Bradley simply turned away. He did not try to comfort his wife. He did not attempt to stop his son. He walked heavily toward the bar doors, his head bowed, a defeated man retreating into the only coping mechanism he had left. William stood frozen in the back of the room. The patriarch who had ruled through intimidation was finally silenced. He stared at the stage, his mouth slightly open, unable to process the comprehensive defeat he had just suffered. He had lost his company, his reputation, and his family in the span of 30 minutes. I did not gloat. I did not offer a final triumphant speech. The victory was already complete, and any further words would only diminish the profound dignity of Leo's declaration. I walked over to the podium and gently placed a hand on my nephew's shoulder. "I am proud of you," I whispered. He offered a small, exhausted smile. "Let's go home," he said. We walked down the stairs together. Maya was waiting for us at the bottom, her overnight bag clutched tightly in her hands. She looked terrified, but resolute. I put my other arm around her shoulders, drawing her close. We walked down the center aisle of the ballroom. The wealthy guests parted before us like the Red Sea. They did not speak. They simply watched the country mouse escort the only two valuable assets out of the burning building. We did not look back at the weeping woman on the floor or the silent man in the back of the room. We walked out the side exit, leaving the oppressive manufactured atmosphere of the country club behind. The warm Kansas night air greeted us as we crossed the parking lot toward my reliable sedan. The illusion was entirely shattered. The toxic empire had been dismantled and left in ruins. But the story was not quite over. The dust still needed to settle, and the final boundary needed to be drawn to ensure the safety I had fought so hard to secure remained permanent. October arrived in Cottonwood Falls with a crisp, biting chill that turned the oak leaves a deep amber. The oppressive humidity of the Kansas summer faded into a clear, bright autumn. I sat on the wooden deck of my farmhouse on a Saturday morning. The metal roof above me popped softly as it warmed in the morning sun. A ceramic mug of black coffee rested on the table next to a tall stack of junior-year literature essays. I held a red pen carefully marking a thesis statement. The only sound for miles was the wind moving through the dry corn stalks across the county road. It had been exactly 6 months since I walked out of the Leawood Country Club ballroom. Half a year since the golden illusion burned to the ground. I looked up from the essays and watched my front yard. Leo was not wearing a tailored prep school blazer or a forced, exhausted smile. He wore faded denim jeans and a stained gray sweatshirt. He lay on a piece of cardboard underneath a rusted 1982 Ford pickup truck he purchased last month using his own saved allowance. He was teaching himself how to rebuild a carburetor using a battered repair manual. His hands were coated in thick black grease. He slid out from under the chassis, wiped his forehead with the back of his wrist, and laughed. It was a genuine, unguarded sound that reached his eyes. Maya sat on the bottom step of the porch, mere feet away from me. She was not taping her wrists in preparation for a punishing gymnastics conditioning block. She wore comfortable fleece sweatpants and an oversized college hoodie. She held a thick paperback fantasy novel resting on her knees. She read simply because she enjoyed the story, not because it fulfilled an academic quota. She had gained 10 pounds of healthy weight since the summer. The dark hollow circles under her eyes had vanished entirely. They both attended the local public high school now. They rode the yellow school bus every morning. They ate lunch in a noisy cafeteria. They were finally allowed to be ordinary teenagers. The legal emancipation finalized in late August. A state family court judge reviewed the financial documents, the prep school tuition records, and the undeniable audio evidence of neglect. The proceedings were swift and decisive. The judge listened to the recording of Vanessa demanding a predatory loan to fund an athletic camp, shook his head in profound disgust, and granted my petition for full permanent guardianship without hesitation. My daily routine did not change drastically on the surface. I still taught high school English. I still managed Vantage consulting in the quiet evening hours, the high six-figure revenue accumulating steadily in my corporate accounts. But the ambient dread I carried for decades, the constant suffocating anticipation of my family's next demand, had evaporated. My cell phone vibrated against the wooden porch table. The screen illuminated, displaying a name I had not seen in 180 days. Beatrice. I set my red pen down next to the essays. I did not feel a spike of adrenaline or a wave of anxiety. I felt a clinical, profound detachment. I picked up the device. I pressed the green icon and held the speaker to my ear. I did not offer a polite greeting. I did not speak at all. I waited. "Caroline," the voice cracked immediately. It was a fragile, ragged sound. The aristocratic, condescending tone my mother spent a lifetime perfecting was entirely gone. "Please do not hang up on me." I remained silent, letting her panic fill the empty space. I could hear the distinct sound of heavy traffic in the background of her call, a stark departure from the silent gated streets she used to occupy. Everything is gone. Beatrice wept. The tears were real this time, born from actual consequence rather than manufactured martyrdom. She poured out the wreckage of the Golden Empire in a frantic, desperate stream. The bank finalized the foreclosure on the Leawood estate. The county sheriff arrived 30 days ago to execute the eviction. The luxury vehicles were repossessed from the driveway while the neighbors watched from their pristine lawns. But the loss of the real estate was only the beginning of their ruin. The federal investigators did not stop at the single forged personal loan application. Once they secured the digital paper trail, they traced the origin of the forged documents directly back to Bradley's home office computer. He had orchestrated the identity theft, providing the financial blueprints for my father to execute the fraud. The contagion of federal scrutiny spread rapidly. Bradley's regional finance firm conducted a rigorous internal audit following the public spectacle at the gala. They discovered he had been misappropriating client funds for years to cover his mounting personal debts and feed his worsening alcoholism. Bradley was indicted on multiple counts of federal wire fraud. He was currently sitting in a holding facility facing decades in a federal penitentiary. My father was dragged down with him. The investigation uncovered a decade-long labyrinth of corporate embezzlement and tax evasion within his logistics company. William's corporate assets were seized by the government. His reputation in the regional business community was vaporized overnight. He was currently living in a rented one-bedroom apartment near the industrial park awaiting his own federal criminal trial. Vanessa abandoned her husband the day the federal indictment was unsealed. She packed a single suitcase and fled. Beatrice informed me through ragged sobs that my sister was currently sleeping on the basement sofa of a former country club acquaintance who only tolerated her presence out of morbid pity. The golden child had become a destitute charity case stripped of her emerald gowns and her high society ambitions. "I have nothing," Caroline Beatrice cried into the receiver. "William blames me for the collapse. Vanessa will not even answer my phone calls. The social circle in Leawood, they look right through me, like I am a ghost. I cannot survive like this." She took a jagged, shuddering breath, gathering her courage for the ultimate audacious request. "You have that big farmhouse out there," she pleaded. "You have the extra guest rooms. I could come to Cottonwood Falls. I could help you take care of the kids. We are family, Caroline. We need to be together. Please. You are the only family I have left." I looked out at my front yard. Leo slid out from underneath the Ford pickup truck. He held up a greasy wrench, smiling in triumph at his mechanical victory. Maya looked up from her fantasy novel and tossed a small fallen acorn at her brother, laughing when it bounced harmlessly off his shoulder. They were safe. They were healing. They were home. I brought the phone closer to my mouth. I did not raise my voice. I spoke with the calm, factual certainty of a woman who had finally rewritten her own narrative. "I have my family." I pulled the phone away from my ear. I tapped the red icon, severing the connection. I opened the contact settings and blocked the number permanently. I picked up my red pen, took a sip of my coffee, and went back to grading my papers. I sat on the wooden porch long after the coffee in my ceramic mug had gone cold. The Kansas wind rustled through the oak trees lining the property. It was a rustic sound that used to make my mother shudder with disdain, but to me it was the sound of untouchable freedom. Across the yard, Leo finally got the old Ford pickup's engine to turn over. The triumphant roar of the exhaust broke the silence. Maya cheered from the bottom steps, dropping her fantasy novel to run over and give her brother a high five. I leaned back in my chair and smiled. This was what real wealth looked like. It was not crystal chandeliers, imported marble, or forced smiles at a country club gala. It was the safety to make mistakes, the space to grow, and the quiet certainty that the people in your house actually want you there. For 38 years, I was the designated failure of a family that measured human worth in credit limits and zip codes. I survived them by becoming invisible, but I defeated them by becoming immovable. The Leawood mansion is currently sitting empty, owned by a bank, its manicured lawns turning brown. The people who lived there are scattered, facing prison sentences and social exile because they built their lives on a foundation of lies. Meanwhile, my simple, metal-roofed farmhouse is full of life, laughter, and honesty. We cook dinner together every night. We talk about real things. We do not hide overdue bills in the junk drawer or pretend to be something we are not. As I watched my niece and nephew rebuild their lives from the wreckage of their parents' illusions, I realized that surviving a toxic family teaches you things you cannot learn in any classroom. Here are the 5 lessons I carry with me now. Blood is a biological fact, not a lifelong debt. You do not owe your sanity, your savings, or your future to people who view you solely as a disposable resource. Family is supposed to be a sanctuary, not an extortion ring. True power is silent. The loudest people in the room are usually the most desperate. My sister and parents boasted about their status while drowning in debt. I built a financial fortress in the shadows. You do not need to announce your success. Let your stability speak for itself. Never interrupt toxic people while they dig their own graves. When my father forged my signature and my sister demanded predatory loans, I did not argue or scream. I documented. If you give arrogant people enough room, they will inevitably build their own trap. A boundary without a consequence is merely a suggestion. Telling my family no was never enough. I had to erect legal, financial, and physical walls. You must be willing to enforce your boundaries, even when it means walking away forever. Saving the innocent is the ultimate victory. I did not dismantle my parents' empire out of malice. I did it to protect Leo and Maya. Building a peaceful, joyous life alongside the people you saved is the greatest triumph over those who wanted to see you fail. Leo shut off the truck's engine, wiping grease on his jeans with a wide grin. They were safe. We were safe. The cautionary tale had finally written her own ending, and it was a quiet, beautiful masterpiece. Thank you for listening to my journey. If you have ever had to walk away from toxic relatives to protect your peace, please share your experience in the comments below. You are never alone in this fight. If Caroline's journey resonated with you, please hit the like button, subscribe, and share this video with someone who needs to hear it. You are listening to Hazel Tells Stories. Take care of yourselves, guard your boundaries, and I will see you in the next video.